I'm Eric Hayden, he, him.
I'm Nick Mason, he, him.
I'm Lilli, she, her.
I'm Safer, he, him.
And this is Neon Static. This is our first ever video podcast. It's very exciting. Hi, Nick.
Yeah. Hello. How's it going?
Lilli, and hi, Safer. Thank you for joining us.
Yes.
This is a super exciting episode. We are going to be chatting with these two fantastic folks who have joined us from NSG. And we're going to be talking about all sorts of stuff, but I'm going to try and focus on Dawn, on the mysterious codename Dawn product that's coming out in late Q1 of 2025. Would the two of you like to introduce yourselves? I guess let's start with Lilli. Who are you? What's the deal? What do you do at NSG? All that stuff.
Yeah, I'm Lilli. I'm on the design team at NSG. I've been here for about probably 18-ish months, something like that. Before then, I was on SBT as kind of the casual Netrunner representative, and I did a lot of work on Dawn. It's going to be the first set that will come out that will have cards I designed in it.
Oh, that's so cool.
Ooh, exciting.
That's very exciting. And what about you, Safer?
Actually, very similar story to Lilli. I joined the development team at NSG about 14, I'm going to say, months ago. I wasn't a part of the Netrunner community before that, actually. I had taken a break from the game. Yeah, back in 2017, I took a break from the game. And I came back specifically to join NSG. And Dawn will be the first product that I've seen through from handoff to being out in the wild.
Wow.
Yeah.
I guess, how long has Dawn been in the works? I'm realizing this isn't on the script, but from what you're talking about, how long have you been working on it?
It's a mush. So we were working on codename. Is the codename for the next set public?
I think it is. I believe
so.
I believe it.
Oh, okay.
I think that
I
it's
thought they had
on
announced-
the release
They
schedule.
had announced it with Dawn.
Okay.
Right? I think that we have on the website somewhere.
I don't know either.
Okay.
I think it's fine.
Yeah. Okay. So we've been working on Piggy Bank, which is the next full cycle for years. I was doing design work on Piggy Bank before I was even on the design team, and then Dawn kind of got put into the timeline while we were midstream on Piggy Bank. I think we've been working on Dawn for 9 to 12 months. It's been a kind of a quick turnaround from it not existing to now being having art and names.
I was going to say, because that timeline actually feels short for what I feel like I remember Dawn. Was it announced almost as soon as hey, we're going to do this? Let's tell everyone. I mean, it's a small community, so it's hard to keep some of these things under wraps, but
Yeah, a little bit. There was some time between, because there was some figuring out as to what the process for doing it was going to look like.
Yeah. Interesting.
So you've been a member of design team for about 18 months, and I guess around the same, you said, Safer, you said about the same amount of time.
I joined right before RWR. I guess I joined part of the way into RWR.
Okay.
So it was right after TIA released, and I think we're in version 3 of RWR at the time.
Okay. I think for the benefit of users and also for Nick and I's sake, users of our audio podcast with their ears, how would you say, or what are the different roles, I guess, between design and development? Because it's not something, especially with development, I feel like people don't necessarily know what that entails. So could you each kind of describe your roles and maybe where the boundaries and where the blurring and crossover exists between the two?
Yeah. I guess I should also, before we get too far away, I think 18 months was an overestimation. I think I probably joined at about the same time that Safer did.
Okay.
But
fact checked.
Yeah. So design is kind of the first step in the process. We create basically the rough drafts of the cards and get a sense for what themes we actually want in the set. And then once we've done internal playtesting and sanity testing, and chatting about whether or not the cards that we're making actually align with our design philosophies for the game, then we propose those to dev, and then dev, well, yeah, you can talk about the dev process because it's like long and complicated and it has a lot of iterations.
Yeah. The one thing that I want to highlight that Lilli said is design philosophies. That is one of the key things that design is responsible for. And as we develop sets to kind of take them from, excuse me, the initial concepts ideation, initial playtesting stage into kind of the more finalized products, typically speaking, we need to adhere to those design philosophies. So that's one of the key things that we have to keep in mind. But really what we do most of the time is just playtest. So we spend months and months and months and months for every single set, playtesting the set, getting feedback from our playtesters, and then iterating on that based off of their feedback. Now, sometimes this means changing a couple numbers on a card. Sometimes this means, hey, this card slot is not meeting the design goals that design set out for it. We have to then go back to design and say, what card do you want to be in this slot? Or in the case of maybe sometimes they, are working on another project or something, sometimes they might come to us and say, well, what do you think best fits this slot? So there's a lot of refinement that we do on our end, and both are basically game design, but different areas of game design.
Yeah, absolutely.
What kind of form does that intent take? Like, what's an example of we wanted this card to fill this role? Like, what kind of a role? What's an example of maybe something in the past that you've done that would give us an idea of, like, we want something that gives Shaper money, or is it more specific than that, or what does it look like?
Well, so I think Dawn is a big set for us for like 1,000 reasons, but the design team, I think, is really we've been putting a lot of effort into codifying what we want the game to look like going forward, in like a sort of philosophical sense. For instance, which factions get access to from zero economy has been like a really litigated topic. So, not everyone can have that. Not every faction can have that. The game's not healthy like that. Similarly, we could have a discussion about drip economy, or like how good a 3-2 agenda can be, or what icebreakers have to be costed at. So I don't know if I can give like sometimes it's easy to figure out what we want a card to be. Like, if we want to print a card that's like Doof, we just try and make the best version of that concept. But sometimes it's a little bit more abstract. I don't know.
I can give an example.
So,
like, we design noted in the early creation of Dawn, that they really wanted there to be a skunk void challenger, something that within the confines of System Gateway plus Dawn can meaningfully allow the runner to interact with skunk void, because it's a fairly predominant strategy in when you're just looking at System Gateway. Standard has things like Pinhole and other tech cards. So that was a design goal for one card slot that's coming up in Dawn. And it's on us as the development team to make sure that it adheres to that goal, and it's actually being a skunk void challenger, as well as adhering to the design philosophies around what a tech card should look like. So that's an example.
Yeah.
I don't know if you saw the big smile light up in my face when you said that you have like a maybe not a pinhole, but like a pinhole-like effect in that package. That's really exciting.
I should say it is not necessarily a pinhole-like effect.
Well,
it is something that specifically challenges Skunk Void, and that can take a lot of different shapes and forms.
The card that came to mind, I'm forgetting the name of it, but it's like you take a core damage and run, and all the cards in the server light the fire. That's the one. Is that like Eric is constantly trying to put this into decks because we just got to get rid of Managarm and like the Anoetics, and like it'll deal with like this weird like on steel effect and all these sorts of things.
Light the fire wins games sometimes. I'm just going to say.
And the art is great.
Sure.
And the art is great. Yeah.
There you go.
And it's thematic, and it's
Yeah.
Feels
It
very
just,
anarch.
like,
Anyway,
like that type of effect, I think, is really interesting. So yeah, that's it. But you're right. There's a bunch of different ways you could do that. So
cool. Well, I guess let's jump into some of our Dawn specific questions. Nick, do you want to lead us off with the first?
yeah. So like, as a product, right? Can we get an idea of like how big Dawn is going to be, like relative to other products? I don't know if you can give us a card count, names, effects, costs. If you just want to send the card list to me directly. No, is that not okay?
Good joke. We're done with it now.
Yeah. Well, you can always join playtest to help out in playtesting the set.
Yeah.
Excuse me.
You don't want my opinions.
So
hashtag Buchhalter did nothing wrong.
So System Gateway, not System Gateway, System Update is 82 cards. And we're really looking at Dawn and System Gateway together as being a really great 1-2 package for newer players. One of the intended goals that was given to us by design was making sure that you had the ability to deck build in a variety of ways in all of the factions and a lot of different archetypes, and really expand what is available for players that are taking their kind of intermediary step. And so you can expect something that looks fairly similar to System Update in terms of size.
Awesome. And that was actually one of the questions that we had about kind of non-Dawn specific things, although I guess it is very, very specific. How much effort are you putting, and this is the question we'd written down before, and without knowledge of what you just said, how much effort are you putting into making System Gateway and Dawn a standalone environment, independent of whatever happens to be in the rotating sets at a given time? And will Dawn be more or less immune to rotation moving forward? That's kind of part B, I guess. But it sounds like you did put some serious thought into it.
A lot of effort went in.
It was like a primary focus.
Yeah, I think that at certain moments in this process, it has been the priority.
Yeah, I agree.
Awesome.
Design did their playtesting before they handed it off to us. And correct me if I'm wrong on this, Lilli. I believe it was just System Gateway plus Dawn.
I did not test a single game in Standard because,
right.
The dev on the whole is way better at playing Netrunner than we are, and the playtesters are way better. So if I put together a shitty Standard deck and I'm like, yeah, this card I made feels totally balanced, that doesn't mean anything.
So yeah, we are the owners of the playtest process, and we spend a lot of effort and energy to make sure that we were getting data for both Standard and for Dawn Core is what I think we ended up calling it. So that it was a really large effort for us. And, to be completely frank, playtesters are usually players that are fairly entrenched in the game. They're willing to commit their time to dealing with unpublished cards and giving their feedback on it. That usually means that they're fairly involved. So we, as dev, had to basically take a lot of effort and constantly remind ourselves of this is really critical that we get the Dawn Core portion right, because it's also the basis for every startup format moving forward.
Yeah.
So
right. Yeah,
that was something that we just had to nail and make sure that we get right. But that's been one of the most difficult challenges for development within Dawn. The cards might be relatively straightforward in comparison to an RWR, but the format, rotation, all of this other stuff made this a very challenging development cycle.
Yeah, it's the foundation of your card base, right? You're building this very critical piece, and if you get this right, then startup moving forward because startup's been plagued a little bit by lack of pinhole in this last one, a couple other things. I know that was kind of a big issue where now clearinghouse is this big problem if you can get it behind a big barrier and all these things that, because it wasn't designed, at least from what I understand, with the intent of design isn't thinking or wasn't in the past startup. This kind of fixes a lot of those issues, hopefully moving forward, which is fantastic. That's really great news.
And so we can confirm this is going to be like basically taking the place of system update in terms of startup. So it'll be the same like most recent full cycle. If there's a half cycle out, that'll be in the format, and then system gateway and dawn.
Yeah,
is basically the plan for startup going forward. Cool.
Yes, for moving forward in the future, when a new set releases, it will be system gateway, dawn, and whatever that set is. We don't have don't have any like news to share in particular about what startup looks like exactly when dawn comes out.
Yeah.
So I think maybe you've just covered it, but if there's anything we missed there, Lilli, how was the design goal and scope of Dawn different than that of a cycle?
Yeah, I think
Like a regular
we
cycle?
largely did cover it. It's like just kind of the pressure was a lot higher. These are cards that are going to be around for a long time. So we can't just like wait for rotation, or if we ban them, then suddenly we've banned some of the first cards that new players are gonna pick up. There's also like there's a lot more pressure to make cards that are digestible, right? Like the
Yeah.
gameplay needs to like make sense at a glance because new players are going to be playing this. So it's a lot of cards ended up on the cutting room floor because they were too complex, like not necessarily because they were bad ideas. Hopefully. But I think the set looks, from a complexity perspective, looks fantastic right now. I think it's like going to be an amazing new player product, and yeah,
Super exciting.
Yeah.
Yeah. So and this was kind of something you talked a little bit about earlier in terms of like having a card in a slot that does a thing. So is that kind of the goal as far as you are, when you're building out a product like this, each card has a role that it's going to play? Or are you more focused on, Shaper has a package of cards that allow it to do X, Y, and Z. And, you kind of need each of the different pillars to make that package work? Or is it more, individual focused? Hey, you want to deal with tags, you're going to put this card in individually.
Little column A, little column B. It depends on the faction. But yeah, like we want the set to be internally cohesive still, so that people can like we're telling people what we want them to be playing with when we put a package of cards in the set. So we want it to be as visible as possible. But because any piece of the package could change, it's like maybe there's a tentpole card that the package is built around, and then this other slot is just works with that card. So like if the synergy piece is problematic, we just change that into something else that works with the core pillar that's solid. But then a card like Tag Hate, for instance, that probably isn't going to lock into the synergy. So it's just like make it the best tech card we can, or most appropriate tech card we can.
Safer, so I know that you researched this question. By the way, we shared these questions a little up front so that these folks could check to make sure that we weren't going to ask like just a bunch of specific cards, like tell me the text of all the cards. But I know that Safer had a discussion with Narrative about this one, so I'll ask you the question. It sounds like this set is maybe a little bit less narrative focused than a cycle would, but I'm curious to know Narrative's role in this process. If they had, if they developed a story around what's going to happen, or if it was more just narrative agnostic than a traditional cycle would be.
Yeah. So system update was, kind of a collection of cards. There wasn't necessarily a cohesive narrative throughout it. System gateway is a little bit more of like a setting piece, and I think that Dawn is a continuation on system gateway in that way. Any other narrative details, those will come out in the future. It's not my place to share those, but RWR had this like huge narrative arc, and that's not necessarily what Dawn's focus was.
That's fair. Yeah, it's sort of what I was expecting, but I wasn't sure.
Is it like, so the comparison that I keep thinking of is, right, like RWR had this narrative arc. It had like set events that were represented in cards and everything.
Yeah.
And then compare that to like System Gateway, which definitely had more of like a setting and an overall, like there were some events happening and things. The story there was cool with all the stuff going on the moon. Is it more like that where like, hey, you know, this is a setting. These are some characters who are in it, some things that could happen just based on that. Is it more along those lines than like RWR where it's, you know...
Yeah, exactly.
There were 3 knives because there are 3. Okay.
Yeah, exactly.
Cool.
Yeah.
There were 3 knives.
Well, look, there were 3 people got knives.
I know.
You know?
Hey, spoilers.
Yeah, the set, I won't say any specific details, but like the setting that narrative has been cooking up is rad. And I've really loved every piece of art that I've seen so far. And we're kind of, I'm not on narrative, so I won't speak too much about like future plans or like design space, but Lou showed up on Opera Research. Like these are pieces on the chessboard, right? We're fleshing out our world. And I think, if we're doing our job correctly, I think the next like couple years of Netrunner are going to be really, really cool from just about every angle they can be. I'm like,
people should be so hyped for the art. The art is so good.
I mean, I was blown away with the art from the last set. I couldn't believe when I saw Cult Lessons for the first time. I was like, "You're kidding me! This is so cool!" Like, you know, just I love it. I love the art.
Yeah,
I think the visual team has really hit their stride for sure.
Yeah,
Dawn's
that's so cool. I think, you can definitely see the progression in the art. You know, coming from Ashes, where everything was footings were being found, I think, and then now we have a lot of. I'm seeing art from, you know, the folks that I kind of associated with new, with the FFG products, and then new folks coming in and really like knocking out of the park. So it's very exciting. Kudos to our team; they're doing a great job.
Yeah.
Safer, how have you dealt with the problem that Dawn's code name is too good, and like? The community at large does not want Dawn to be called anything but Dawn. Can we make that happen?
It's so good. It's really a new good. Dawn. It's.
I will say that I shared this perspective. I think many people share this perspective. Yeah, exactly. I was really rooting for Dawngate as like the format name, and it just didn't catch on. No one wanted it. Everyone wanted Dawncore instead. I think people will be happy with what narrative managed to do with the set name though.
Okay, they had a challenge.
They had, we all had a lot of challenges for this product for sure. Narrative no different, and I think they did great. So
yeah. So just sort of generally, there's a lot of stuff rotating, specifically IDs, which pillars of both the deck design and synergies and everything. So are we expecting just one new ID per faction, or like, can you give us an idea of what we should expect as far as the ID space going forward after Dawn?
Yeah, so we are losing a large number of IDs, not just a system update, but also I think there's 386 cards rotating. Maybe that's including system update. I don't remember. I went through and I looked. 388. Yeah, it's a lot of cards. So rotation was probably the largest challenge of Dawn's development in general. And IDs, in the ID space, I actually say that it wasn't particularly challenging, and kind of retroactively looking back at why that's the case, I've counted about 12 competitively viable things that you would run into regularly. That's not to say that people don't enjoy playing Quetzal or other IDs like that, but you just don't see them particularly commonly. And those are some of the IDs that are rotating. I actually learned that the MTI, whatever the MTI Jinteki ID was, I learned for that card for the first time while doing this count. Right?
Yeah.
So we are losing fewer IDs than the number itself suggests in terms of normal play experience. Now, having options is really nice and really good, but that's just one of the trade-offs of doing the rotation faster than we would have done it normally. So,
right. Yeah, I mean, like Saraswati mnemonics and Jemison, yeah, SSO, right? There's a lot of IDs rotating that are they're fringe, we'll say. Like
They exist.
They are someone's favorite ID. They're not most people's favorite ID, right?
Yeah, you've probably lost one game to them and then gone, really?
Neat.
Yeah.
That was cool. Good job.
Yeah.
Okay. So that means from maybe it's not really too much of an opening, but I do imagine that some of those IDs were because they existed, like SSO, for example. Advanceable ice was probably a thing that like design needed to like consider the fact that SSO exists when they're designing cards that have, ice that has advanceable properties on it. So is there anything that you can think of that like that opening, this opening or reopening of the ID space has meant for you, Lilli, like when you're thinking about design, if there's opportunities of like a card that was holding something back, or like, this was a problem, or was that just not really a consideration as you were doing design work?
I feel like maybe I'm forgetting something really egregious, but I think all of the IDs that are rotating right now that have really constrained design space have been banned already. I'm thinking like MT and I had the other good one, Cavanessa.
Oh yeah, Cabanessa. Yeah, you just ban them, right? That's
get rid of them. Right, like
the ID that comes to mind the most when we were talking about limiting design space to me is like R+.
Yeah, and that's gone now, thank God.
Yeah,
like,
yeah. I've got a really nice Yakuza alt art that like has a got banned, but it's the best. I will take this hit. I will put it on a shadow box on the wall and look at it longingly.
You could play.
I did like my R+.
You could play Startup.
That's true. I can always play Startup. Perfect.
Yeah, there it is.
Good solution. Until it gets banned there. We'll see.
TikTok.
Nick, do you want to take the next one?
Yeah. So are there any like general lessons from either previous cards or like previous environments that guided the design philosophy of the set? Like, this specific card does a thing too efficiently, or, maybe that's not a type of thing we want to bring back into the game, even if the end effect is something we needed, or,
Yeah, I probably could have set aside some more time to think about specific examples. But this game has existed for a while now. We've got like a decade of Netrunner, and everyone on the design team is a huge fan of this game. And we've got like an encyclopedic memory of all the like random little bits of garbage and busted cards over the years. I would say for me, looking back at cards that were too good is sometimes less useful than looking back at cards that were not good enough. And we spend a real amount of time in some of our like design philosophy meetings, just like talking about why doesn't this card work? Is it because of an environmental factor, or is it that the numbers are terrible? Right. So I don't have a specific example I can just pull out of my ass, but
I have one for you, actually.
Thank you.
There we go.
So design and dev, I think it was before RWR was actually released, we talked about R+. R+ is, I guess, is just going to be the through line for this conversation. But we talked about R+. We knew that R+ was going to be banned, and it was kind of critical to have a tag-based ID in NBN. Imagine a standard where there wasn't a tag-based ID. And I believe that went fairly heavily into design's mentality around how to make that effect work.
Yeah. Yeah, sorry, I just had a bunch more thoughts on talking about ID design, but I think we've started to move on. But,
no, but look,
we got time, but yeah.
Okay. I am always down to talk about ID design. So
okay, yeah. So I'm good.
Well, it's one of the things that I have noticed is that like IDs tend to have like they want to focus the deck, but the ones that have been like the most generically successful, I feel like, are the ones that are the least focused. Specifically here, I'm thinking about Hoshko and Lat. Card draw, it turns out, is good. and they both have like hoops to jump through, but like it's just if you're putting it into a really aggressive deck, card draw is good. If you're putting it into a super control-y like slow deck, card draw is good. An engine deck, card draw is good. So I was wondering how you think about like that kind of stuff as far as when you're designing versus as compared to something like Freedom, where the effect is really powerful, but you do have like it comes stapled with a bunch of cards.
Yeah, I mean, I'm not a huge fan of IDs personally. This isn't representative of the rest of the design team necessarily. I think that they constrain, like when we get to the intermediate and higher levels, they kind of constrain deck building in a way I don't love. But the most important things that they do is point players in the direction we want them to be looking. I'm thinking I think Seb is like a really potent example of this. Seb is like a rad ID that a lot of people really love, who asks bizarre deck building questions. Those questions would not have ever been answered if we hadn't put them on an ID, or maybe it would have taken a lot longer. Value IDs, like the topic of value IDs comes up semi-regularly because we have myriad examples of value IDs that are too good. And I can't say that we'll never make another busted value ID. I'm sure it'll happen. But the most important thing for a value ID to do is to ask an interesting question during gameplay. Like the specific synergy IDs should be asking that question during deck building. And then the value one should be really like, you have to do a weird thing in gameplay that you would never do, or that you would almost never do, to get the value out of it.
Yeah, that lat game of trying to match the hand size exactly, and the play around it with, I'm going to res this Spin Doctor at the end of your turn. Well, all right, I'm going to crack a Stone Ship and, like that kind of stuff. Yeah, that's an interesting way to look at it. Deck building being the question ask versus the gameplay itself.
Yeah.
So there's a ton of really, really iconic Netrunner cards being rotated out here. And a lot of them I think are probably in system update. I'm thinking of cards like Diesel, Snare, Inside Job, Clot, Imp, Dirty Laundry, Biotic Labor, Archer, Project Atlas. Like all of these cards are like, in my mind, they are core to the identity of Netrunner, probably because I played when they were, I've played the game a little bit longer than Nick here, and some of those cards are kind of cemented into what I consider to be the identity and the feel of Netrunner. So that's a huge challenge for you now when all those cards are rotating. What was the question? The question was like, how do you deal with maintaining, like, how much are you concerned with maintaining the feel of the game in the new cards that you're designing versus exploring new territory and saying, we're not worried about keeping the game exactly how it was. We want to introduce these new concepts. Like how are you splitting your effort between those two goals, or are you doing that?
Carefully, I guess. This is sort of like Dawn is sort of our ship of Theseus moment. And a lot of cards that we have all loved for years are never going to be in standard again. And that's like kind of scary, but we can't save everything. And I won't like call anything out, but we did feel like certain cards were really worth keeping around in a similar form, because they're just like, too well designed, or I think it's easy to fall into a trap of just kind of, and we definitely did during this process. I think it all got ironed out, but it's easy to fall into the trap of, well, FFG made this perfect card that has like, one line of text and just does the thing. We can't just do that again. We have to make it, do a kickflip, right? I'm thinking like, I love Simul Chips. Simul Chips very cool, but that's a very good, like a key example.
Yeah.
Like we could have maybe just done a clone chip and adjusted the cost. But,
Simul Chip is an example where it came out in my mind a lot more interesting. I like that card more than I liked Clone Chip, and it is one of my favorite cards in the set. And we'll come back to Simul Chip.
Okay, but yeah, I'm not calling it out as a card that I think is a failure or anything. I just think that it's like really illustrative of that that design impulse to take a really core effect and a really simple effect and put a ton of words on it so that it plays differently.
Yeah.
Right.
And sometimes it's important to just do the simple thing. Mostly the design space is
totally
really
agree.
exciting because we've all had a year or more, because we've been thinking about rotation for a long time, to process all of these things going away. But I just really encourage like everybody to like, the sky's not falling, but like take the time that you have left with some of these FFG cards in standard. Because yeah, this game's fantastic, but it's going to be different going forward in several large and several very small ways.
And that kind of brings me to a related question, I suppose. So, like, these are like the pillars that we were just talking about. But I've always thought that one of the more interesting things about standard, especially right now, is all the little things that only show up like when the meta needs them. So like things that answer specific, like really dominant strategies, but, are a one-of card you just throw into the deck because, hey, I'm expecting to see this.
Mad Dash.
Mad Dash is a perfect example. Yeah. When there were all those punitive decks, you started to see a one-of Mad Dash just show up as like, hey, I'm going to get that 7th point, before you can punitive me. Ice Carver, Malia Zaloka was like a big one in like against like asset destruction with Miss Bones, that kind of thing, or Klavetnik when Bonhar was just running the show. Those kinds of things are.
This is a bit of a stretch. In one deck, one time, it did that thing. Klavetnik's okay.
Well, but the point is that like those pressure valves existed if there was one strategy that was dominant, and is that something that when you're designing Dawn, right? It's easy for FFG because it seems easy because there's so many cards out there, so many cards printed. Is that something that you're looking at in Dawn as far as like creating these pressure valve cards that maybe aren't going to see play all the time? Maybe they'll only be a 1 or a 2x in a deck ever, but they're necessary to have there so that, the meta doesn't get taken over by a particular strategy.
Yeah.
Or is that more of a cycle thing, like cards that go in cycles?
Yeah.
We've had a lot of discussions about like what a tech card should look like, because I think we have examples in the past of tech cards that just kind of turn a matchup into like a 90-10 situation.
Mm-hmm.
I think you named a lot of like really great examples of tech cards that don't just win the game for you, that you have to like still work really hard, or maybe you just have to work a little less hard because you've made a correct deck building decision. So we're trying to not print any tech cards that like auto win a matchup. But Safer was talking earlier about the Skunk Void Challenger. Like that's the slot in the set that we spent a lot of time thinking about, because that's a really important matchup for any runner deck in in startup. But,
yeah. So this is rotation in general was easily the hardest part for us to kind of develop the set around. There were some cards that were perfectly fine designs that once we play tested with them just would not have been okay in future standard. Mostly runner cards, because if you look at rotation and which side is having more relevant things rotated, it's the corp side. Definitively, it's corp cards are the ones that are. So we actually had a really large issue with side balance, and part of that comes from a smaller card pool where the answers the runner is presenting to your questions, you just don't have as many questions for them. So their answers become more specific and more targeted and more reliable. And so I think that is one of just the byproducts of the card pool shrinking so much. And that's just something that it's going to change how we necessarily think about the game. And while I think that it's really difficult for us that have been playing for so long I think it's partially just change is what I'm trying to get at here. If we think about the game's been around for almost a decade, more than a decade now. So we are a firmly entrenched game. And that means people are used to a certain thing. But just because the card pool is getting smaller, just because you're not going to be able to look through hundreds upon hundreds of cards that were somewhat irrelevant and try to find the perfect answer to the solution, doesn't mean the game's going to be in a bad spot. The game's going to be in a great spot. But as NSG continues to release products, then we'll get back to that point where you can have these niche interactions that players get really excited about, but that's just a byproduct of how large the card pool is more than anything else.
For this next question, I guess, without inserting our own thoughts too much on the identity of the Crim faction, this is kind of a pointed question, obviously.
Blue is best.
Blue, we both are fans of the Crim faction. I guess the thing I'll say is that in the past, recently, it's felt a little bit to me like Crim. I want Crim to feel more criminal. Take that how you will. Has this rotation offered an opportunity to shift the identity of the faction in a cohesive manner? And if so, what direction are you trying to make the faction go?
I,
You can say pass too.
Such a broad, yeah.
It's very broad.
Crim is also my favorite faction. And
Same.
It's because it's the best one.
Yeah, I love it. It's kind of tricky because it's been sort of on the bottom for a little while now, but Crim has, from a competitive perspective, such a high skill ceiling that you still see folks like Whiteblade putting up good results with Criminal. And I see something and obviously he's one of the better Criminal players to ever do it. But I see stuff like that and then think, man, is Crim actually bad? I don't know. I think that it's...
If you ask him, the answer is no, and you're just bad.
Yeah, I think there might be
Not you, but the royal you.
I am bad. But I'm gonna take this question where you asked about Crim and talk about Shaper for a moment.
Okay.
So when I came back to the game in 2019 ish, Shaper was the worst runner faction, and it wasn't close. At least that's how I remember it. And for basically NSG's entire tenure from System Gateway onwards, we spent a lot, and I say we, I wasn't really a part of these teams, and but a lot of effort was put into making Shaper feel competitively viable and they could do their thing and maintain their faction identity. And we see what happened. That faction's
endurance.
Yeah, that faction became a nightmare. No hate at all to people who worked on previous sets, but it became a problem. So I'm really wary of looking at Crim being, the third best runner faction and saying we need to really zhuzh it up and change what they're able to do, and because they're not that bad right now. They're just difficult. They're always going to be difficult. But that's not to say we're not doing anything. We are doing some stuff.
To me, the question comes more down to what the identity of Crim is, right? So RWR and TAI had a lot of bypass. Which is obviously it's because it's building into Mercury's ability. Their ability triggers a heck of a lot easier if you can bypass 2 or 3 ice on the same run. But are there other pieces of Crim? I mean, the loss of Doof as just one of the most iconic to me Crim cards.
Yeah.
Is Doof rotating?
Are there other pieces of it?
Yes.
I joke.
FFG card. Okay. All right.
Oh,
okay.
shoot. We forgot about that one.
Oh, dang.
They can't steal credits ananymore.
I can't believe no one in playtest or anyone realized this.
Anybody
Is it too
has
late
brought
to add
that
a
up?
card?
Yeah. No,
Q2, Q3. We'll see.
Yeah. But are there other parts of the Crim identity that you're interested in exploring here, or setting as the foundation that then, because like I said, RWR was focused on it because it was a part of what Mercury wanted to do. Was bypass. And is there a different focus or a different baseline you'd like to set with this kind of set?
Yeah. So.
He's good at asking long questions.
That's okay.
Sorry. Yeah. No. I write an essay and then I put a question mark at the end of it, and that's.
Okay.
My personal feeling on Crim is that they are sort of allowed the highest card quality, like when we're talking about like individual cards. If you look at like something like a Doof or a Account Siphon, these types of cards, or a Bravado, to take a NSG example, these cards are like insane powerhouses. But when you're looking at Criminal as a faction, you kind of lose out on. Sorry, I'm kind of sick. My voice is a little froggy. You lose out on some of these like big picture synergies. And I think when you're looking at Liberation Cycle and pointing out all these bypass cards, and a lot of them didn't necessarily like land super strong, we were, I think, maintaining that Crim doesn't have these like crazy synergies, but we were still building this theme into the set. And the cards don't lock together super well because Crim cards don't really lock together that way. They're just like haymakers. You don't really win the game building a Rube Goldberg machine like the other two factions can. But we're going to keep exploring things that we can do in the future. I've got a ton of ideas. I just about said one. I don't,
Go on.
Yeah.
No, I'm kidding.
Well,
Wait, go back
I have
and
a couple
point that out,
thoughts
please.
to
Can
add
we highlight
the
that?
Criminal thing here.
Yeah, go ahead.
So Criminal is also my favorite faction. And it was really important to me to see Criminal have a little bit more direction and focus in Dawn because it's the baseline. One of the things that we saw in Startup was that Criminal just didn't have the kind of backbone economic pieces to function. And so it wasn't really viable. And I think that's, again, that's something that comes around when the set didn't necessarily, like a previous set didn't land and they don't have the same tools or options to keep up with the other factions. So in Dawn, Crim has the very appropriate economic backbones for what they do. And Crim in multiple times in testing has been the strongest faction. It's not necessarily going to be that way on release, but yeah, there were some busted cards. there was a couple absolutely busted cards and couple busted iterations of things at various points.
Galter 2.0 or what do we?
Yeah, it costs 2 credits now.
Okay. Yeah. On the subject of specific cards, I will ask one question about specific cards. Will Dawn give us any more mandate subtype cards?
Almost. We almost got there, but we removed it from one of the cards is changing direction, and doesn't need the mandate anymore. But we almost put mandate on a card in the set.
Well, the goal of the question was just confirmed.
Cards?
So the Sudden Commandment is
I
the
see.
only
Yes.
mandate card that exists, and it says you can't.
Yes.
If this is the
you
first
can't
mandate that's been played, it has a certain effect, right? And you've just confirmed that at least Design and Development are considering mandate for use in the future to make that like a thing, and not just it existed in this one box and it is Sudden Commandment. That's cool.
Yeah,
That's
mandate
really cool.
was put there as a safety valve for the card, so that we could reach into our toolbox and say, this card that's otherwise fine, if it interacted with Sudden Commandment, would be an actual issue for the game. And that was a case that we had for a while in testing. So
Cool. I like that it exists.
Yeah, mandate's like a bad word. We don't want to put it on cards, but like we have it as a tool, right?
Right.
I was going to say, I mean, like I have multiple times wanted to play the second Sudden Commandment off of Sudden Commandment and been like, dang, this stupid rules getting ahead of me.
Why'd they make me less good?
Yeah.
the answer is someone in playtest busted it.
No, this one's yours. This is your question.
Okay.
This is your question.
Last question about specific cards. How did you achieve designing the mini faction successfully again in Dawn? I want to hear all about it.
Especially in so few cards. I mean, in 84, they fit in a whole mini faction. Well, 3.
Sorry, bad jokes aside. Whoa.
Crimson mini faction.
Okay. Crimson mini faction. For those of us watching on YouTube, you'll notice that my face just got suddenly zoomed in and tracked, and apparently it did a motion gesture to to the new webcam, and I don't know how to fix it. So
neat.
I'm here now.
Let's try things.
Yeah.
Don't put your hands out.
I want to know.
I don't know how they work.
Control things.
Your camera just decided you had too much headroom.
Yes.
Yeah.
I can't really salvage this into a real question. I just wanted to say I really like the mini factions, and I hope you do.
I really like the mini factions.
I guess that is a real question. Is there any way that in the future that ever comes back into question, like introducing one mini faction on both sides or anything like that? Or is it just too, like, the question was asked and it was a failed experiment from your perspectives? Or is it something that, you just incorporating the ideas into factions like some of the cards have done now?
I think that the mini factions were, even if they maybe failed in some the old mini factions, even if they failed in maybe some respects, I don't think that it's correct to look at that as a failed experiment, because the idea of what if we had a fourth runner faction, right? There's like infinite design space there. We could do anything. We know some stuff that does work. We know some stuff that doesn't work, right? I won't say anything specific, but like this is a thing that we're thinking about, and like stay tuned.
Cool.
I don't think you'll ever see a Corp mini faction.
Yeah,
I've been in zero of these discussions, by the way, the design discussions around like what is it about the previous mini factions that worked and didn't work. But game wise, like we have 4 Corp factions, and it's hard for me to imagine that Netrunner is ever in a place where there's a Corp mini faction.
Design could lose their fucking minds. And
I mean, look, if you handed us a Corp mini faction, I would have a lot of questions.
Why?
But
why?
I would have a lot of questions. But if you had good answers to them, then maybe I get on board. Maybe I'm right there with you.
Yeah.
But
So mini factions existed to solve the problem of we're doing these big box sets that have opposing matchups, and there's only 3 runner factions. Like, what if we made a 5th Corp faction?
Yeah, that makes that problem harder, doesn't it? Yeah, that's yeah.
Okay, so I think those are the most of the questions that we had. Besides, kind of one last catch-all. I guess to each of you, whoever's ready first, raise your hand. I guess what has been your biggest either design or development hurdle as part of Dawn? What's been the most challenging part of it?
I can go first.
Yeah.
Savor. You win.
I mean, this one's very easy. It's also very top of mind because I've been working on Dawn so much. It is rotation. It's rotation, and in some ways, balancing everyone's individual expectations around what that means to the game. If you ask every single person that you ask, whether they're a playtester, general person in the public, an NSG member, doesn't matter, they're going to have a different idea about what rotation means for the game. And trying to find the sweet spot that makes the best version of the product possible, that is easily the largest challenge. And I guess second goes to side balance. We'll just throw that one in there. Yeah.
Any other comments on sorry, I guess Lilli, you should have a turn.
I have my biggest challenges are completely different. So if we want to talk about those things, I think that we should do that before I say mine. Okay. Sorry, I thought you had a thought.
Yeah. I feel like, I mean, we've talked a fair bit about rotation and that kind of thing already. So, and side balance is hard to say without,
playing.
having the cards
Specifics.
in front of me so I can yell at you. How dare you
Don't
design
yell.
this?
Don't yell.
So
No, I'm going to yell. I'm very aggressive.
this set isn't the first one that I've worked on. I did some work for PB before Dawn got put in the production pipeline, but there's a couple designers, meaning members of the design team, whose first set is Dawn. It's my first full set. And we are the first people to do work on the set, and we like go into our hermetically sealed design vat, and then we come out a couple months later with some stinky ideas, and we're like, it's so fun, please trust me. But the parameters of Dawn being, it's a new player set, it's a set that's going to be around for a long time, it's not going to naturally leave the environment. A lot of those like stinky ideas, which maybe would have been rad, just can't be printed in this set. And I feel like a lot of game design, and maybe just a lot of being creative, is an exercise in letting go. And there's a lot of letting go that all of us have had to do with Dawn. Yeah. The nuts and bolts answer is trying to make cards that have less than 1,000 words on them and aren't stupid. But really, it's letting go.
And still do the thing.
Letting go is my is the biggest hurdle.
That's I haven't been in your seat, obviously. I've never tried to design a card, but the wall of text cards can definitely be, even if you just like flipping through your binary collection, looking at them, reading through a paragraph versus reading through those one or two sentences that just work. That's got to be actually something I wanted to ask when I was talking about Simulchip before. I had in mind Spin Doctor. One of my favorite cards is Spin Doctor. And it just has it has a couple of lines of text and two different things that it can do, or a different the trash ability, the drawing the cards thing. But something about Spin Doctor allows for this like explosion of play possibilities, right? Between drawing cards at unexpected moments, and maybe it's the fact that it's a fast action that you can kind of do all this stuff in just the res, and it doesn't take a click. But how often do you look at a card like Spin Doctor and try to like say what it is about this card that makes it like so good? And do you try to bottle lightning that way, or are you just kind of where are you looking for inspiration, I guess is my question. Are you looking at other card games, or are you looking at previous designs and trying to use that a card that was successful and cool?
Yeah, I think we can look at the previous card pool for like precedent. That does help a lot. I just like go on walks and listen to music and put my mind to thinking about Netrunner, and then like stuff balls out, which is not a useful answer.
No, that's actually really cool to hear that it's just like coming from inside. You're not looking to external inspiration as much.
For things like Spin Doctor, I wasn't around when Spin Doctor was made and how it was iterated on. But generally speaking, how you make something like Spin Doctor that feels so cohesive and feels basically perfect. Like you wouldn't change a number on it. You might change the faction, but that's a separate conversation. Besides that part, the really game design is about rapid iteration. Technically, you don't need rapid, but it's about iterating on things and proving that the concepts that you come up with are what you expect them to be. Like, is expectation versus reality, like one doing playtests and stuff. For example, like I was listening to the audiobook of Play Nice about Blizzard Entertainment and their early 90s and middle like 2000 success. And one of the things that really jumped out at me was that for the time, they were one of the only companies that was playtesting in massive volume and having a bunch of different people playtest their games and putting those kind of their assertions, their expectations to the test. And it's over long periods of time that you kind of make those finer moments. And sometimes you get lucky and you're like, this card's perfect. There's a couple, I think Lilli designed a card in this set that had one number change.
Yeah, right? and I did anticipate it also. I'm gonna like
you did or did not?
I did. Yeah. I figured it would go up. Yeah.
It was such an amazing design. It inspired by an iconic card, and we increased its cost by 1, and that's the only thing that we've touched, and it is exactly the card that it should be, and we're so excited about it's the Spin Doctor version of that card, the card that it was inspired by. So sometimes it does just perfectly work out, but the development process.
Know what it is?
Say that again?
I would love I would love more than anything in the world to spoil that, like to be able to like be a part of that process. But that's not up to me. It's like my favorite thing I've designed.
Spoilers. Do we know approximately when we can start to see spoilers for Dawn? Or can you not say?
I'm happy to say that you can expect news to come out of Dawn starting at the beginning of next year. Like some general, like, you know, a general idea of like timeline and stuff. And I wouldn't expect spoilers like in January. Probably not in February, but yeah.
Okay. Yeah.
Fair enough.
No major like delays at this point that you think, oh, it'll probably get pushed. You know, the timeline hasn't been announced as being delayed, so we're still on track, right?
I'm talking about timelines, like trying to get a definitive date, like exact release date, like with people like this week. So we
That's really exciting.
are in a fairly good spot, I would say.
Awesome.
Excellent.
Sounds like you've been working on it for a while, and I'm glad, considering the impact that it will have to the game moving forward, that you all took your time and you got it right and you didn't feel rushed to get it out. It's a really exciting product, and I want to thank you for your effort on it, because as a person who puts effort into this game in a different way, it's sometimes a thankless job to some degree, and it's like, why am I putting so much effort into this thing? And when you step back and like consider all the people that are playing it and getting enjoyment out of the game. If it weren't for folks like you doing this, we wouldn't have a game anymore. And so thank you.
Yeah.
Thank you all. I think we're volunteers too. So I think one of the things that's really cool about the game and the community is that like the people in NSG working on the game have a very similar motivation to content creators or people just playing the game. Like we all just enjoy the game. We all want to see it.
They're just psyched.
Yeah, exactly.
Yeah, we just want to see more cool cards.
Is there anything about Dawn that we haven't asked, or anything in general that you want to say or share or talk about that we haven't done so far?
So we haven't talked too much about Rashida, and I thought we were going to talk a lot about Rashida.
Well, I mean, that
Feel
was
free
the
to comment.
That was the unstated pillar card that's rotating, right?
Yes.
Well,
I've been hinting at it
Rashida
with the side
like,
balance stuff previously, but
that's interesting.
I was gonna poke for specific examples of what you thought was like the big upset there, but okay, so Rashida's definitely a huge change for the Corp. Go on.
Yeah. So Rashida leaving the card pool is incredibly impactful, needless to say. In RWR's development, because I was kind of returning to the game and I was relearning all of these different things, I kind of quickly saw a pattern that was happening in testing, which was that when the corporation fired Rashida, they were in a good spot and could contest the game. And in the situations where Rashida either didn't fire because the runner got to it, or it was just in the bottom stack of their cards, the Corp had almost no chance of winning the game. So and I think that is held true in current standard. So if you then take the additive that I said before, where rotation gets rid of more Corp cards than runner cards, you end up with a massive side balance issue. So Rashida, we're just in general, Rashida goes against design philosophies moving forward for the power of neutral cards. I think that's fair to say, right, Lilli?
Yeah, that's absolutely correct.
Yeah. So reprinting Rashida, even a slightly toned down version, was just not really an option that we were interested in doing. So for, I guess, like the quick spoiler, like the mini spoiler, is that, you know, the neutral cards, there'll be 4 neutral cards in Corp. There's 2 ice, there's one operation, there's one upgrade, no assets.
And oh no, for some reason I was thinking we knew the operation, but that's a Wayland, right? The one that was released.
It's
at
a
Worlds.
Wayland.
Oh
Okay.
yeah,
Let the man speak.
KPI
Sorry, go ahead. Yeah, no,
I was like, you know what the operation is? That's
no, I was thinking KPI.
We know KPI.
Yeah.
So that has been what we've been testing with throughout Dawn, and it's just been trying to find different ways to give the corporation an appropriate, like each faction their appropriate amount of tempo that is not at Rashida's power level, because reprinting Rashida, the issue with reprinting Rashida would be that we go back into the issue of the Rashida lottery, and generally speaking, we, in a smaller card pool, if you have really, really powerful cards, you just see those cards everywhere. It actually decreases the amount of diversity that you would expect. So it's really critical for us to not print something that's like exactly like Rashida, but instead find ways of giving each corporation some form of tempo that's maybe 70 to 80% of what Rashida could provide. It also keeps the doors open for us to continue to print cards that give the corporations tempos in some way, shape, or form.
Yeah, I think that all makes a lot of sense. That sounds good, and I agree. You know, Rashida was the baseline. Like, start a corp deck. You better have a good reason to not put 3 of these in here.
I can think of one list that doesn't run Rashida, and it won Worlds. But that is a very specific reason, and it's because it could play wall to wall. So wall to walls were generally like, that's an interesting card. It's doing a unique thing. It has a unique output, right? But you wouldn't necessarily want to play wall to wall alongside Rashida. And I think that's the really critical part, is that when you have a critical mass of things like moshing and price and steelskin and strike fund, that's what creates issues.
Right. Lilli, for you, is there anything that we didn't talk about that you wanted to mention here? Or, I mean, open the floor to whatever you want to talk about at this point. We're done with the hard questions.
There's a lot that I do want to talk about, but I don't think I can. Like, I want to chat about what it was like to design specific cards, or like what we were thinking.
Yeah.
Or,
well, maybe we could have a revisit episode after.
I was going to say, after everything's out,
Yeah.
we'll come back and chat more process stuff. So.
If you're down, we would love to have you back. So that'd be cool.
Yeah, this was great.
As a follow-up, talk about specifics and you know, what the cards looked like when they were busted and how you had to change them, or what the specific card was that you are so excited to share about your magnum opus.
I would love to do like here's how design first proposed it. Here's all the iterations along the way. Here's what we were thinking, what we were seeing, and all that kind of stuff. I would love to do that with just like one card or something, you know, so that'd be great.
I started thinking, well, okay, so for when I got into the game, however many years ago, magnum opus was like my favorite card. Like, maybe that's a red flag about me.
What happened to criminal being your favorite faction?
It took a second.
Economy's gonna be broken.
When you open the core set and you read the rulebook, it says to shuffle all the Shaper cards together and then all the Jinteki cards together. And Magnum Opus was the coolest card in that set. I got around to criminal eventually, but I was the lead for designing Shaper in this set, and I tried to put a Magnum Opus riff in, and it didn't make it through. So that's not. No, I fought for it. Safer was like really, really considerate. I can't talk about what's in the set, but I can talk about that didn't make it in.
Yes, that one was. Yeah. That was actually, I feel like, one of the last cards to get fully redesigned. Right? Am I remembering correctly?
In Shaper or just in general?
Not just in Shaper. I'm thinking through. Well, no, maybe just on runner side.
It was the no, that one went a long time ago. That was like 6 months.
Yeah,
yeah.
It was a long time ago, but I guess there's been some cards that
there was one other
functionality of
one other Shaper card really recently, which I'm also super
Oh, right.
Yeah.
But that is
Yeah,
for
that one. Yeah.
Thank you.
that's for yeah. There was one other shaper card that left the pool, not because it was a bad design, right? Not because it didn't work because of whatever else, but because it was way too good and synergistic with the rest of the shaper card pool. It was like shapers were going through their deck, like turn 4, they would be like 20 cards left in deck. And this card was one of the enablers for that. And that was just like,
Wow.
we couldn't.
A lot of card draw.
It wasn't necessarily because it had a lot of card draw on it. But
Okay.
Yeah.
Again, this is for the
secrets.
follow-up, it feels like.
Yeah.
Yeah. This is a
Bookmark
follow-up.
this one
That's
for the
the story for then.
Yep.
All right.
Yeah.
Well, we want to say thank you once again for both of you joining us on the podcast. And considering our window is closing here on our scheduled time, I think that'll be the end of the episode. We won't have our normal. Obviously, if you've been listening on the audio feed, this has been a little bit of a different episode, so we didn't do our normal segments, and we won't carry through with our quality time.
That's fair.
Which is I look forward to it. But thanks again for coming on. Maybe next time we can do a little more chat like that and schedule some time in for what else outside of Netrunner is stuff that you'd like to do. But thanks again. Thanks for listening. If you're listening to this, so first of all, if you're watching the video, hi, this has been fun. We get to do this and see faces, and it's been a unique challenge. I haven't been able to stop and say, hey, Nick, what should we do next as easily, which has been a challenge. But all of this stuff is made possible because of the support of our patrons, and we want to say thank you to our patrons. And if you want to support Neon Static directly, financially,
look at those!
I see
Look
the
at
poker
those
chips.
amazing
I heard you
poker
playing
chips.
with poker chips, and I wanted to ask.
I heard some clicking. Yeah, wasn't sure, but you know,
one of the ways that is most easily digested by us, is if you go to patreon.com/neonstatic and join there. We also do have at this point. What time? What it is? It is December 22nd, 2024. I have like a bunch of like 22 extra sets of poker chips that Safer was just showing. If you're interested in buying a set of those from us, it helps feed the equipment from the channel, and you get cool poker chips to play Netrunner with. So email us at neonstaticpod@gmail.com if you're interested in those. Thanks again for joining, everybody, and we'll see you next time. Remember to run with your eyes closed.
because what you can't see
Can't hurt you. And design cards with your eyes open, because Netrunner's too good to do that silly thing with.
Thanks for the advice.
Bye, everybody.
Bye.